So here's a question to start us off. Did Donald Trump, in his defeat, actually lose his grip on the GOP? Or did he fundamentally reshape the party's entire political physics, making his style, while making it inevitable, even when he wasn't on the ballot?
That's a great way to put it. It's not just a political question anymore. It's a structural one.
Yeah.
We're really looking at the fallout when old forces like consensus and policy get replaced by pure performance and loyalty.
And that's exactly why we're doing this analysis today. We wanted to give you a bold new take on book coverage, an extended analysis of David Drucker's In Trump's Shadow. This is more than just a summary, though we do have those available.
Right.
This is about examining how an author shapes an argument, how they build influence, and how they earn or maybe lose your trust.
Which is, I think, a great tool for anyone who wants to read with a sharper eye. And it's also, frankly, excellent for any aspiring writers out there trying to figure out how to navigate these polarized topics.
And as we get into this, just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation, all powered by Google's Notebook LM. It's designed for a deeper, more dynamic kind of analysis.
And we're using this book less as a crystal ball for 2024 and more as a diagnostic, a snapshot of the party's challenges at a very specific moment in time.
A really specific moment. The book came out in 2021.
Exactly. Right in that vacuum after the 2020 election, the second impeachment, you can feel the frantic energy of all these Republican elites.
All of them scrambling to figure out how to inherit Trump's base,
While dodging the chaos that came with Trump himself. It's a real balancing act.
What's so interesting is the core tension here. The book isn't really a prophecy. It's more like a diagnosis of a party that's become structurally dependent on what you could call Trumpist energy.
And Drucker is writing from inside the conservative ecosystem. That's key.
So his framing is much more procedural, more strategic.
Right. He's asking, how do we win? Not, is this the right direction morally? And that focus really sets up this interesting relationship between the author and the reader.
Okay, let's unpack that relationship. The author's ethos, how he builds trust.
It starts with his positioning. Drucker is a longtime conservative reporter, Washington Examiner, a CNN contributor. He's branded as a real reporter.
Someone who does the legwork. That phrase carries a lot of weight.
It's completely strategic. That fact-driven insider posture is set up to contrast him with all the partisan infotainment out there. It creates what you might call a permission structure.
A permission structure. Let's break that down. What permission is he giving his conservative reader?
He's giving them permission to criticize, to see the flaws.
Okay.
Think about it. For a conservative reader, there's this tension. They can see the dysfunction, the risk, the chaos. But if they say it out loud...
They risk feeling like a defector, like they're joining the quote-unquote liberal media.
Exactly. So Drucker, as this credentialed conservative voice, provides a safe space. He lets them analyze the party's flaws from a strategic point of view without having to question their core beliefs.
So it's about tactics, not ideology.
Precisely. His whole ethos is just the facts, deeply sourced, fair. He treats every candidate, from Mike Pence to Ron DeSantis, as an operative in a power game.
Not a savior or a villain.
No. It's all about even-handed scrutiny of their maneuvers.
And he reinforces that by profiling just about everyone. Pence, Pompeo, Haley, Rubio, Cruz, DeSantis, Tom Cotton, even the Trump family.
Everyone gets the same treatment, which makes it feel neutral. It shows he's committed to understanding the system, not just one player in it.
And that really leads us right into the structural logic of the contest. The logos, the argument itself.
Right. And reviewers often called the tone opinionated, well-reasoned, and often depressing. I think that nails it.
That really does sum it up. It's this mix of cool institutional analysis with this almost grim understanding of how performative populism now runs the show.
The whole frame of a Game of Thrones-like contest that injects some narrative drama. But the central argument isn't really about who wins a personality contest.
No, it's scenario-based. It's about the structure.
Right. Drucker's core logic is basically a comparison. Scenario 1, Trump continues to dominate. Scenario 2, a post-Trump realignment.
So what's the critical takeaway from that comparison? What's the real challenge for these contenders?
The takeaway is that the base's preferences have been fundamentally structurally reshaped. And that leads to, I think, the most important insight in the whole book.
Which is?
That virtually every single 2024 aspirant has to run as the next Trump.
Which is a chilling thought. It means Trump's physical presence is, as Drucker says, hardly required. The party is trapped.
It's trapped by its own success in mobilizing a base around grievance and performance. the whole focus shifts,
You stop talking about personality or policy.
and you start talking about incentive structures. The system now rewards aggression, it rewards norm-breaking and constant culture warring. If you don't perform that way, you just can't win the base. That's the engine of the book.
A very pragmatic, if bleak, analysis, and that feeling of being trapped connects right to the pathos, the emotion of the book.
Yeah, that Game of Thrones metaphor isn't just clever branding. It creates a sense of real anxiety, foreboding.
It taps into our appetite for drama, for sure, but it also highlights the fragility of it all, the danger of a party that maybe can't self-correct.
Right, which is why reviews mention that feeling of dread, this sense of a party locked in a cycle that just keeps escalating.
And we can see that in Drucker's strategic choices as an author. For any aspiring writers listening or anyone who just wants to understand how these arguments are built, his structure is really instructive.
It's definitely not a single linear argument.
No, it's more like a mosaic.
A brilliant mosaic of political biographies.
Yeah.
Each one shows a different strategic response to that same gravitational pull.
You have Pence, the loyalist who finally hit his limit.
You have Haley, the dissenter, trying to find a way back in, and then someone like Tom Cotton, who's presented as the disciplined mimicker.
So the book becomes less of a prediction and more of a strategic map.
Precisely. It's all about understanding the system, not just one event. And he uses scenario framing all the time. What if Trump runs? What if he doesn't? Which makes the whole thing feel forward-looking.
And his language is so effective. He uses these analogies to compress really complex ideas into vivid images.
The one that sticks with me is the GOP is Trump's plaything.
Yes. That makes him both the owner and the absolute gravitational center of everything.
It's an undeniable image. And his characterizations do a lot of work, too. Like describing Tom Cotton as what a sophisticated version of Donald Trump might have looked like.
That one line maps out a whole spectrum of Trumpism for you. It defines the very narrow lane that all these candidates have to race in.
And that idea of a defined lane is actually a good place to pause for a moment. If you're finding this kind of deep dive analysis valuable, especially the focus on how authors build arguments, we want to point you toward Mindful Moments.
That's our YouTube channel. It offers expanded AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques, all of it aimed at inspiring reflection and, well, rational thought.
It's for people who want to get beyond just the surface level stuff.
Okay, so let's move into the next phase, the critical reader's discernment. This is where the real value comes from, right? Engaging with the book critically.
I think so, because Drucker and many reviewers use what you could call an implied critique.
How does that work? What's he implying?
Well, by highlighting traits like performative populism, racial dog whistling, and own the libs bluster as necessary for success.
He's implicitly critiquing a party culture that rewards that behavior.
Exactly. He's showing, without having to say it, that this is the price of admission now. He doesn't have to moralize. The facts do the work.
He also uses irony really effectively to underscore this fracture in the GOP's sense of reality.
He does. He juxtaposes Trump's humiliating defeat with the simple fact that far too many people don't acknowledge that defeat.
That gap between fact and belief is the whole crisis.
It's the heart of it, and this is where we as critical readers have to be aware of certain latent fallacies. Because Drucker's insider ethos, which is so good for building trust, also risks creating a kind of a normalization bias.
Normalization bias. Can you translate that for us? What does that mean in this context?
It means you start treating radicalization as just another strategic variable to be managed instead of a fundamental threat to the system.
So you're analyzing how a candidate's rhetoric helps them win a primary.
And not the broader damage that rhetoric does to society. The analysis can end up undermarking the real democratic and moral stakes.
So things like voter suppression or disinformation, they become just part of the game, good strategy, rather than a threat.
That's the danger of what you could call procedural myopia. The book's frame leans so heavily toward the horse race, who can win, that it can obscure those bigger structural power issues.
Can you give us an example of how that works?
Sure. A reporter might spend 5 pages dissecting, say, Mike Pence's strategic path through Iowa, his visits, his donors. That's useful information.
Right.
But by focusing so hard on personal ambition, the analysis can sidestep the deeper structural issues that make that race possible in the first place, like gerrymandering or minority rule.
So the focus stays on personality tactics, not institutional damage.
Precisely. And the critical reader have to connect those dots. Which brings us to the final takeaway for anyone listening. The difference between information and understanding.
Let's crystallize that. What's the information Drucker provides, and what is the understanding we need to bring to it?
The information is the who, what, where, who's running, what they said, what the polls show. That's the fantastic detailed data Drucker gives us. It's tactical knowledge.
But
Understanding is grasping the deeper dynamic. The fact that a party tied to resentment politics and unreality will just keep reproducing Trump-like figures because the incentives demand it. It's the diagnosis of the illness, not just a list of the symptoms.
the book gives us the information on the players.
And our job is to surface the understanding of how their choices impact everything else. Freedom, equality, our shared ability to have a rational conversation. When you read it that way, the book really reveals the GOP's structural dependence on grievance. And that dependence, well, it undermines the very idea of a shared civic brotherhood.
Which brings us right back to where we started, and it leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to think about. If this book shows that the only path to power in a major American party now requires maximizing division and embracing grievance, does the actual winner of that contest even matter to the future of our shared reality?
That's the question, isn't it? It suggests the outcome might be fixed, regardless of the person.
If you found this expanded format valuable, we would love to hear from you. Your feedback really helps guide what we do next.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.